Okay, gang, we're going to move on to the second part of fire extinguishing methods. And in this one, we're going to talk about fire operation methods. This is going to be a quick flyover. Please, please, please watch the other videos about firing operations. There's lots of great videos in this module. Also know that one group is going to do one of their tools presentations in the second half of the course on firing out operations, and they'll go a little more in depth on some of these things. I'm just going to do a quick flyover here. This will be way shorter than that last video. So in firing operations, we've got some more tools than we used to. You know, it used to be just a fusee or a flare or a torch, you know. But now we've got all sorts of all sorts of tools. So these are just some of them. But again, we're going to have presentations on this. This is kind of the newest thing. So these little guys here, these little ping pong balls, when they're injected with styrene and something else, and when they are injected with this one fluid, that then they start cooking, and when they drop them out of the air or when they shoot them with one of these launchers, when they hit the ground, they start to, the ping pong ball part of it melts, and the material inside will start a fire. So you can see here's one dropping from a helicopter, here's a launcher, here's a drone version. The drones are kind of cool, you know. It has to be done by someone who is trained in this. All firing operations should be done by people who have taken the NWCG firing operations classes. This is a TerraTorch. This is the TerraTorch itself. This is one in operation. Of course, a drip torch. These are different flares that can be either shot from launchers or thrown, ignited and thrown. This is your basic fusee. This is a flare, like a highway flare that the CHP might use. The difference between a fusee and a flare: the fusee is longer, has a ferrule for a cardboard ferrule for handling. Therefore, you don't, accidentally burn yourself, and it's longer, easier to use. You don't have to bend down as far. The highway flares are oftentimes good for an emergency situation where you got to pop them and throw them, pop them and throw them, when you're just trying to fire out and have a counterfire and you're doing something in a hurry. I've seen them used in those kind of situations. So let's look at these 18 slides are mostly about terminology, okay? We're just going to familiarize ourselves with the terminology. So general term, burning out is any kind of an operation that's done to remove fuels between the fire and the fire line using fire. When we do burning out, it reduces mop-up time. It incorporates spot fires. It can widen a fire line. It can clean up the line. So it can be used also to create a safety zone. There are different kinds of burning out operations. So usually they're done to widen and strengthen a fire line and incorporate, like I said, spot fires and clean up the operation. So what's the objectives? Well, it can be used as a direct method of attack, but most of the times it's indirect. It's used to strengthen, widen, and secure those control lines, to reduce the required holding force, to reduce mop-up and the need to cold trail. It's used to cut out fingers or areas of unburned that are kind of to straighten out the line or make it a cleaner line. To incorporate spot fires. If you got an island in there, let's just burn it out instead of running the risk of it catching fire again. Things like that. And of course, aligned to light fuels or utilize natural or existing barriers. So it provides safety zones and escape routes, as well as we heard in the story of the Man Gulch fire. Backfiring is a special technique. It requires planning, but it especially requires training. It's not something just anybody should do. You have to have a certification, and usually your crew boss will be the one that has that certification and will coordinate the backfiring. It's an indirect attack method that's used to slow a fast-burning fire, and the key to successful backfiring is that the main fire draws the backfire to it. They get sucked together, and sometimes that requires a counterfire. So here's an illustration here of a backfiring operation that's going on here, but a counterfire that's going on out here. Now, if you use humans to do this, you want to make sure the timing is perfect, but sometimes we'll use flare guns or throw flares out there, but the counterfire draws the backfire to the main fire, and they come together and meet, and basically the fire just goes out because there's no more fuel. Firing out the starting and spreading of fire from a control line towards the fire edge. So for the base of this operation, sometimes we'll use a wet line, and usually if we're using a wet line, it's foam and frothy foam. But very common, we use a road or a stream, or we construct a fire line and then start it from there. When firing out, if you really want to be successful, you don't want to make the fire bigger, you want to make it smaller. It's going to get bigger for a second and then get smaller. So you got to regulate the heat. You got to plan it correctly. If you generate too much heat, you're going to lose control of the fire. So not enough heat, your fire's not going to burn. So today it's raining outside. Good luck with trying any kind of a firing out operation. When we do firing out of areas for fire control, where we create buffer zones around housing areas, when we do that, it's usually in the spring, just before, when the grass is cured but everything else is still green. So a lot of times this is used for training and for creating buffer zones. They'll do big fire out big areas. You just don't want to start a fire like happened once out here in the Castaic Junction area, where they were doing a firing operation in the spring. It got out of control and shut down Magic Mountain. There was so much smoke. So, yeah, that was not a good deal. I'm losing my voice fast here, gang. But this is why I stayed home. So, firing must not jeopardize. I realize this is. I changed something. Sorry. Firing must not jeopardize the safety of other personnel. You don't fire out below a crew. You don't want to adversely affect any other divisions on the fire. So it always has to be done in a coordinated manner. Do not start the burning until the line has been prepared and all forces are available to hold the line. You always have to have an anchor point, and whenever possible, you fire from the top down in steep terrain. You adjust to fit changes in conditions and situations. So here's some of our different kinds of firing out. A backing fire is a fire that's going to be low intensity, and it's going to back into the wind or against the slope. So we're going to use it against the fire, against the wind, against the slope. Some of the hazards are there's always the possibility of a wind shift, spotting and rolling material, but and it also is slower. It's going to take more time in this method, but it's for the most part a safe method. A flanking fire is where you're going to set a control line parallel to the wind, and you're going to run along the flanks and start fire, and it's going to burn in to the fire, and it's allowed to spread at right angles to and towards the main fire, and it's a little more intense, but it's also going to be really effective. And it's a little scary because it's generally burning with the wind. Head firing is definitely burning with the wind. So it's fire that's ignited at a control line, allowed to burn with the wind. So it can result in a much more intense fire because you've got the wind pushing it. But if you've planned it right and the right place, the right type, so if a wind shift is expected, it's really effective. But if you're burning towards an area that's already black, it's really effective. Spot firing is spots of fire rather than strips that are ignited. And when we use the helicopters or those ping pong balls, you can see them falling from this helicopter. This is, spot firing, and we're going to do it in big spots, and hopefully it all burns together and then becomes one force. Strip firing is probably the most common and effective way of burning out. So if you want to widen a fire line quickly, you're going to use a strip firing. So fire is done in strips, and depending on which way the wind is going, your first person goes, then your second and your third. Now, when you're doing it this way, you certainly don't want to be caught with a wind shift. So you want to do it at the right time of day and be paying attention to the wind. And when you're going if the wind is going in this direction, you're going to go, the third guy, the guy furthest out, is going to go first, and then your second guy, and then your first guy. So you want to build that fire line. And I got a good picture here of some guys doing it. So you see this one's started, and he goes ahead, and then he's following along with the drip torch and widening it, and then somebody probably right outside the picture is following along, which is nearer to a road, and they'll widen that line, and it'll burn towards this brush, and as this fire meets this fire, it'll go out. Last slide, ring firing is done to save a resource, a structure, something of value. So ring firing is done in a ring around those structures or whatever it is of value, historic or archaeological site or something. So it isn't anchored. So you want to do it and then either stay in the unburned island or get the heck out of there. So it's designed to create an unburned island. Okay, that's it. I told you this one would be really short. Just want you to get that terminology. Look through the book. I believe there's a few more terms in there in regards to firing operations. But we'll have a presentation on this as well. Okay, I hope you guys are all well. And as you can hear in my voice, I'm still a little bit sick. So, okay.